Major news concerning China and the Middle East. The Chinese continuing their push to replace America as a global leader. On Friday, China brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran to restore diplomatic relations. What does this mean for the world and for us at home? I want to welcome in our panel Walid Faris, Newsmax foreign policy analyst and former foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. We're also joined by Lisa Daftari, counterterrorism and foreign policy expert and editor-in-chief at the Foreign Desk. Great to have you both joining me on the program today. Walid, I want to start with you talking about the significance of this move by China and whether the Biden administration was blindsided by this.
Well, apparently the Biden administration only reacted to something that seems to be very big, which is to reestablish diplomatic relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The question is why? It's probably because the Saudis didn't want to partner with this administration in going to China so that China would help them in this move. But the bigger question, Kilmani, is that why would the Saudi, after 2 years of partnership with the Biden administration, would decide one day to just go to China and ask them to help them with the Iranians? And the answer is very simple, because the Biden administration refused to listen to the Saudis. Saudis, the Emiratis, and other Arabs were asking Washington, this administration, can you help us with regard to Iran? Can you contain Iran? You're going to sign a nuclear deal. We're not part of it. And the hesitant administration here, basically, at the end of the day, that was the reason why the Saudis went to China to get those results.
Lisa, where do you see the cooperation now between Saudi Arabia and Iran? They've restored diplomatic ties, but what does that mean in theory or in practice of areas they may cooperate together?
Right, and that's probably the biggest question here. They've been sworn enemies not only for 7 years. I know a lot of media is reporting that there have been frozen relations for 7 years. They've been frozen for 44 years. Why? Because when the Iran regime came in 44 years ago, they wanted to spread their brand of Islam throughout the region, and that's Shia Islam. And the Saudis said, not on our watch. We are Sunnis, and we're not going to allow this to happen. So that's why you saw a lot of proxy wars, a lot of proxy terror organizations come onto the scene to combat one another. But what happened here is China basically skipped a step. And they watched maybe the United States, maybe they were great students, and they watched the United States broker a deal under the Trump administration called the Abraham Accords, where they looked past enemies and they saw opportunities. And they said, you know what, everybody wants prosperity. And maybe we can focus on trade and opportunity and look past our animosities. And that's exactly how they brought Saudi Arabia and Iran's regime at this very moment together to say, let's focus on the opportunities. Now, the question will be, and that was your wonderful point, is could they put aside these decades-long animosities towards one another? Will they look past the fact that Iran is still jonesing for that nuclear weapon? Will they still look past the fact that they're in a war in Yemen and in many other parts of the Middle East where their proxies are fighting one another? And I am very dubious of that. I don't know that's going to happen right away, but I do know that they're looking at the opportunities that are in front of them right now, and they all pushed forward.
Iran's desperation grows deeper by the day, particularly as protests now head beyond their 6th month right now, the revolution that's happening in that country. Walid, I really want to ask you how China is benefiting from all of this.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the revolution. And let me just go back 1 second and say there are 2 reasons for why the Iran regime, out of the blue, and Iran is an ally to Russia and China. They don't need Saudi Arabia in a sense, but because of the pressure made by the Iran revolution, because girls and teenagers and minorities are pushing, and eventually even the leadership of Iran knows what is going to happen. There will be change. That's one reason. Second reason, Israel was preparing to deal with the Iranian nuclear weapon or coming nuclear weapon, even without the United States. So it is a brilliant, strategically brilliant movement by Iran to say, okay, I will make peace with Saudi Arabia. That would alleviate the pressure on me. Then they could turn against the revolution and smash it. And then they could isolate Israel. China sees an opportunity that the United States is not intervening. And instead of us pivoting to the Pacific, to Asia, Asia is pivoting back to the Middle East. That's the problem now.
And Lisa, in an unusual bipartisan move, you had 223 U.S. House members of both parties actually joining forces and offering a resolution demanding an end to the theocratic regime ruling Iran. Do these gestures by Congress do anything to change the situation on the ground?
They do. And I think that the Iranian people have asked for many, many years, more specifically in the last 5 months, for the White House, for Washington, for any leadership around the world, especially the European Parliament and the Biden administration, to put support behind their movement. And they've always stopped short. They've created some daylight between themselves and the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, but that's never been enough. Look, it's 5 months into this, and as Walid said, these women are courageously coming out onto the streets. It's not just women, it's the men that support them. It's all of society saying, this is not just about this feminist movement. It's not just about the economy. It's about the whole thing. We want regime change, and we want it now. And they've never been as clear, and they've never had such an opportunity. And that's why they're reaching out to leaders in Washington, D.C., especially the Biden administration, but they're not getting any commitment towards regime change. But at the very least, the Iranian people know that it was Carter's administration in 1979 that helped push that revolution and bring in this regime. And now they're asking for the Biden administration to do the same, to support this movement, because they know that's what it's going to take this revolution to the next step.
Lisa Daftari and Walid Phares, it's always my great privilege to have both of your voices on the program. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Well, the